Welcome to the Principles of Success, Interviewing the Experts, book review, The Thank You Economy by Gary Vee. Now, this book is not how things should be. They are how they are. It is not a theoretical book. It's a book that is documenting a shift in our society that you need to be aware of. So, the basic premise of this book is because of the internet, and particularly the invention of social media, we are back to being a small town community. Long time ago, if you wanted to do business, if you wanted to be successful, you did business with the people who you knew. When you needed to go to the butcher's shop, you didn't go to the butcher's shop, you went and bought meat from Dave. And if Dave was a jerk, you stopped buying meat from Dave and you went and bought meat from Jack. So because of social media, we are now back to that, because if Wendy's is mean to you, you'll let everyone in your circle know, and possibly everyone in their circles might know as well, that Wendy's was a jerk. All of you might start shopping at McDonald's instead. McDonald's is nasty, in my opinion, but just using that as an example. So you need to build relationships. Building relationships with your customers are super important. By the way, this is a business book. You need to build those relationships with your customers. Otherwise, they will leave you because you're not treating them like a part of your community. And people need to feel valued, so they will go to where they feel valued. And speaking of value, you need to bring value first. This is how you get customers nowadays. If you don't bring value first, then there's no interest in your product or service. So for example, I have a podcast on success. Maybe a couple of you might buy one of my books in the future because I brought you value with this podcast. Maybe you'll repay me by enjoying one of my fictional books, or because I brought you value a little bit in the podcast. Maybe it was enough value to convince you that I might know what I'm talking about, so you might buy one of my nonfiction books on success and finance and stuff like that. By the way, none of which are actually written at this exact moment. So you need to bring value, and then the value that you then bring needs to be enough to get them to want you to give them more value. Because if you bring them value and it was a waste of their time, then they're not going to want more. You also need to communicate with your customers. If there's an issue, solve it. Don't just pretend that they don't exist. Fix the things that you've done wrong, and a lot of times, people will respect somebody who's fixed something that they've messed up more than if somebody's never messed up. The next main point to talk about is you got to go to where the people are. I like calling it following the eyeballs. It doesn't matter how great your radio ad is if everybody nowadays is listening to podcasts. Nobody's hearing your radio ad. It doesn't matter if you have a great TV ad if everybody's on Instagram. You need to create your advertisements to get your customers to pay attention to you and put them where those people are actually going to see them. You need to put them that are native to what those people are seeing. The next point is a lot of times customer service has no obvious direct ROI, and that means return on investment. And there's no immediate financial gain from being kind to your customers. However, over time, you'll develop a relationship and a reputation, and eventually that will lead to significant more ROIs than if you had been cold-shouldered and decided that they weren't worth too much of your time because their ROI wasn't that big. So back to social media, you're not jumping trains when you go from Facebook to Instagram to YouTube. You're moving along the cars. When one social media dies and a new one is born, you're just moving along the train. Bring your customers with you as you move along that train. Don't just think of it as abandoning ship and having to start over every single time. And a quality audience is more important than quantity. If I have 1,000 listeners who support me financially with their interest in my products, then it is more profitable than if I had 1 billion listeners who have never spent a dime. And you could have 10 listeners, but one of those 10 could be Tony Robbins. So you never know. And the last point I want to talk about real quick is doing fine. We're doing fine how we're doing things right now. Well, I'm sure that the whip makers for carriage drivers thought they had a great business all the way up until the Model T was gaining steam, and then they were out of business completely. Who would want an automobile? Horses have done great for thousands of years. So just because you're doing fine now does not mean that you don't need to constantly adapt to the changing future, because if you're not growing, you're dying. Anyway, I will leave it there for this week because I am recording this the day of, last minute, and there's several reasons for that, but this is a perfect example of not letting there be any excuses. I'm doing this terribly. I'm going to put it out there terribly. I hope you guys enjoy. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to do it professionally, but I still wanted to get it out there for you guys, and I hope you all have a great week, and I'll see you all next week.